leave the motor out and do all this stuff first. That's the lesson of this particular video. Today on Crazed Performance Repair, we're going to continue this on-3 performance upgrade with twin turbos. If you have not seen any of the previous videos, go ahead and click the link in the corner. It will have both the beginning of this series and it will have the previous video from this series. Now, on the previous video, we left off with me being concerned about a fire hazard. And basically, the wiring harness and the brake lines right over here in this corner are far too close to the exhaust manifold / downpipe because of all the turbo system going on over here. There's going to be just a ton of heat concentrated on those items, and I need to address it. Now, all of a sudden in the middle of this clip that you guys are just watching, I magically had a harness move. So I actually got started on this. My battery died on the GoPro, and so I just kind of got started, and I figured I'd continue the conversation after I move some things around. I have much less concern about the fire hazard after playing with the harness some. Now my concern is moving towards what am I going to do with this harness. I know the On3 kit has parts that are for remote mounting things. I'm not sure where those remote mounting things go. I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of research online, see where On3 actually claims you're supposed to put these things, because I think that's going to be very helpful. Now, finding that information might be tough because they only have a few pictures on their website, but maybe in those pictures I'll be able to see what I need to see to do what I need to do. And so that's where I'm going to go with that. Now, moving the harness made a huge difference. So this portion of the harness, you can see it's got this aluminum wrap on here. That aluminum wrap is for the heat shielding for the factory manifold. Obviously, this manifold comes much closer, and the downpipe comes much closer. And the downpipe is, in fact, the issue on this side here. The other side, just by doing this side, gave me a little bit more room on both sides. And I'm going to show you why here in just a second. So looking at that AC block there, the wiring harness was on that side of the AC block. So running right along here. Now, with the wiring harness there, this AC block was pushed this direction. And because it was pushed this direction, it was against the manifold really badly. And it also shifted the engine over a little bit because it had so much pressure against it. So once I pulled the harness out of this little area here, and now it's laying up here, that AC block, I was able to just kind of force it over, kind of lightly tweak the tubing for the AC, and there's a small gap between the actual turbo pipe here, downpipe, and the block, and then of course there's a little bit more room for the engine as well, so the engine is able to shift over. This allows for a slight increase in room on this side. Now I have, you can see the wiring harness is that silver piece that's going right along there, and then it also comes down here and goes forward, but that harness is still a little bit closer to the pipe than I want, and you can see I do have some room, so I definitely have a little bit more room to play with than I did before. Before it was like that, it just barely would move, and obviously that's going to cause a fire. So at least now I have enough room that I might have the option of a heat shield, and I just have to reconsider things. But before I can truly reconsider things, I have to take and properly mount the engine, and then of course I want to look up where the wiring is supposed to be per the On3 kit. I'm not sure I'll find the information. If I do, obviously I'll let you know, and I will let you know what I do find, because figuring this out is a little bit more of a challenge than I had anticipated originally. I didn't think the harness and everything would have to be moved quite so much. It really, from the picture with the car together that I saw, looked much easier than it is, and it's definitely far from easy. So this is a very advanced job. There is no question about it, and I, as a consumer, would not want to be doing this without proper experience. This is definitely something that should be left to either a shop or somebody who's very, very good hands-on, because this is quite the job. So I'm going to figure out what I need to, and we will continue. So far, no good on the wiring. I'm a little confused, but I'm moving on because I started working on getting the coils in. So I have the new spark plugs in there finally. I just had the coils sitting there before. I don't know if I said anything or not. But I started putting the coils in, and then I realized the fuel system, where I have to reach it, the coils kind of get in the way for me to tighten the fittings down. So I thought, okay, let's prepare the fuel system, get that kind of in place. That's something that's easier to manage as far as trying to get it done. So I kind of have all the fittings where I want them right now, with the exception of one, because I'm going to show you why I chose to do what I'm doing. So when it comes to fuel systems, I have a -10 feeding up here to a -8 conversion fitting. Now, the -8 is the feed line size recommended from On3. So I have a -10 in between where it's impossible to replace the line, just in case he needs to upgrade later. And because of that, right here I have the converter, and then I have the -8 coming up so that it's On3 spec up to that point, or from here on into the engine bay. And if it needs to be upgraded later, it can, because that dash can be put into a dual 8 splitter. And then at the tank side, if he needs to add more fuel there, you could put a splitter down there too without having to go through a ton of work. So upgradable later, but good for me to do the On3 thing. Now, normally when I do a fuel system, I don't know how On3 wants it done. I do know that I need to feed the high pressure pump and I need to feed the low pressure rails. So with that in mind and the fittings I have available, On3 has a couple of brackets. They look like this. Now, these 2 holes right here fit the regulator perfectly. Now, there's 2 of these brackets. However, I do not know where they mount, nor do I really care. Why don't I really care? I think I found a better solution. So, this kit comes with 2 regulators. I am only going to use one. The tuner, he says he will tune it for using a single regulator, and that simplifies everything tenfold. Makes less lines, less trouble inside the engine bay, which is exactly what we need in a tight engine bay like this, is less confusion and less stuff. Because stuff in this kind of scenario is already abundant. We don't need more of it. So we're reducing that by running one regulator. Now, these brackets, I don't know where they sit, but they look pretty big and bulky. Like, if I were to put the regulator on this bracket, it's going to probably be in the way of something else and going to cause me issues. However, I have found that this regulator sits ever so perfectly right here. I can still put a gauge on it. There's enough height here for a gauge. Can still adjust it. Can still get to the nipple for the vacuum lines. I can also get at this fuel line here. This fuel line is going to go to this. Now that is for the return. So it goes through both rails and returns here. This is the last part of the system before the return line goes down and over to where I have the return line sitting down here. Now, that return line will go there, of course. This is the main feed in from the pumps. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the pumps across here, and then this fitting I've chose for flow reasons. The best thing I could do with this right now as it sits is to use this fitting as my union to split out, or my splitter, to split out the fuel from this fuel line to the rest of the system. So this splitter is extremely high flow. Now, it's a big, wide open hole in there, and this is probably a -10 actual fitting on this thing is what it looks like. So, and then, of course, all these fittings have a chamfered edge in here, so it's got a nice contour flow going in, and that goes into this one and this one. Now, the cool thing about this fitting is by putting it where I'm going to put it, this is where the high-pressure pump is. So the high-pressure pump will be fed full fuel flow from the splitter. So the splitter, the fuel is going to come in, it's going to hit the bottom of that and splash out. So it's going to feed the high pressure pump and feed the low pressure side of the system with the regulated pressure. So this guy I'm going to have sitting in here, and it's going to face towards the back. So this guy will go to that main fuel line. It'll come in here. It'll split off, go to the high pressure pump and the low pressure side. It'll go in here for the low pressure side, come down the rail, up over here, well, I mean, a little shorter. It'll clear everything I need it to clear, come into this fuel rail, over to here, and then this 90 degree comes up, and I'm going to make sure that this has plenty of room. I might even make it so loose that I'll twist it when I tighten it down so it folds over this way on top of this thing, or towards this thing. This thing's going to have to move. It's too close to the exhaust. Although this isn't a very hot part of the exhaust, this is just the wastegate. It's only hot during use. So I'll have the line come over here, into here, and then back, and that'll be my fuel system loop. So I think I have the fuel system figured out. Now all I need to do is cut my lines, put my lines in, and once that is done, then I'm going to be stuck going to the wiring. I'll get the coils in and then start working on wiring. another thing that dawned on me is this is only a small fraction of the wiring, because this is the actual engine wiring. Now, the engine wiring, obviously I'm going to have to wrap that around the engine, and then there should be some kind of transmission connector on here somewhere, I believe. Maybe it's this one. I don't remember it being that big. That looks like an ECU connector. Yeah, it's an ECU connector, because these go on part of the intake. But there should be a transmission connector. Oh, here we go. That's transmission. So this goes down underneath the vehicle. This must be the O2 sensors. Yeah, that's transmission. So that has to be ran down the back. So we'll just lay that like that so I remember that now that I'm looking at it. These are obviously injectors and coils, things like that. And this guy is the emission things. So this will go up on there, and then injectors and coils. And then this goes to the computer. I don't even know where I'm going to fit the computer yet. I think this bracket might be for the computer. I'm not totally positive, but that's another thing I have to figure out, because I have to figure out where I'm going to put that. Now, as for the website of On3, the Mustang that they show happens to be an orange car, which is kind of nice in a certain respect, in that when they did show the engine bay, they only show a little bit of the engine bay. I can see nothing in regards to the electrical system. It's clean. They don't even have anything over here. It is literally just the fresh, clean paint. There's nothing over there. So I have no idea where they put this, because they do still have a battery in the battery tray. They are hiding this thing very well. Right here is a coolant reservoir, so I know a coolant reservoir is going to go here. As for this, I saw no referencing whatsoever on the site. I just don't see it, unless maybe the box sits here. So, I don't know. I'll dig into it some more, see what I can figure out. At this point, I'm still at a loss as to where this thing goes. I got some thinking to do. Gotta do some thunking. I did figure out the oil lines, though, so I know how to get the oil lines to the turbos. The rest of it's still vague. Very, very vague. I got all my fuel lines ran, and I also figured out where the wiring is supposed to go. I wish I would have done it before putting the engine in, but it wasn't as hard as I thought it would be to reroute it. I haven't rerouted it yet, obviously. It's still sitting here. But basically what I have to do is I have to pull this up through here. I disconnected it inside the car. There's a spot right along the footwell on the passenger side there, and there's a bunch of connectors that need to be disconnected. And what I'm going to do is pull it all out through this guy here. So there's a hole in the firewall here, and that's where we have to get all the connectors out through. Might be a little bit of a challenge here. But now I have to pull them up through this hole here and out through the top, and then I have to rerun all the wiring right along here. This is actually where it's supposed to go now, and then the fuse box and computer sit over here. So I'll have to look at the pictures again, but I believe the windshield washer fluid reservoir might be gone out of here. I'm not totally positive, but I'll look into that in a minute. As far as the wires go, we at least know now that they go over here, and they get tied up along this guy here. So at least I figured it out, and now I got to go ahead and do the process. Well, I have the entire engine harness out here. You can see it's quite long. And then, of course, this is the top half of the engine and transmission harness here. And I did have to pull it out from both the passenger side and the driver's side. So you can see I had the panels off there. And then that's the driver's side over there, and the panels are off of that as well. And if you're doing one of these kits, be sure to contact On3, because they will give you a Google Drive link that gives you all these pictures that will give you a good idea of where everything is supposed to go. So, very important that you actually click on that. Now I get to go through the pleasure of running the harness on this side of both, on the outside of the frame, on both passenger and driver side of the vehicle. Once that's done, then I should be able to finally continue with the install and get the engine harness all put together, get the computer in, and all the rest. So we will see how well that part of it goes, but for now, at least I finally made some progress on the wiring harness. Well, I'm getting closer. The wiring is very tedious, of course. I have all the power cables ran up here now. I still have to cut them shorter, but before I do that, I got to throw the battery box in. And before I throw the battery box in, I wanted to show you guys what I ended up doing with the wiring. So, you can see I have the main power cables. This is the the one that came with the On3 kit, and then this is the one that came with the On3 kit. This is a factory ground here, and then this guy is the fuel system wire that goes down back to the tank, which I may or may not have shown you that video yet. I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure I showed you it, but at the time of this video, I have not finished editing that video. So anyway, if I've shown you that video, great, that's what this is for. Otherwise, so I have the ground here, and then I have this guy here. Now, I did buy some 1-inch or 1 1/4 giant, it's giant heat shrink tubing regardless, but this is adhesive heat shrink tubing, and I have 2 layers over top of this. What is this? This is actually a eyelet soldered onto these, like I did the soldering on the fast forward portion of this video, and then I have the factory eyelet that went to the battery terminal, and then I used a bolt on here to bolt this together, and then heat shrinked it just to keep the ground separated. It is a ground, so it wouldn't really matter if it did ground out, but I don't want it scratching the paint. And the part that does kind of matter for grounding out is the fact that the ground wire actually has a amp meter on it that the computer is reading from. I'd imagine for cranking or something. I don't know what Ford's using it for. I didn't really look that deep into it. But you can see this is underneath that battery box here. I still got to put the tray in for the battery. But the wires come down. I have them running over here, and then they go to the fuse box there, to the back of the fuse box, not on the fuse box. And then there's an eyelet there I'll show you in a second. I also took and mounted this guy up here, and then we have the main harness there. Now that main harness, I don't have any of these deals here holding it in place. Instead, what I have for holding this down into place is basically it's just sitting behind this little bracket for the wire here. This is the ABS wire, and then I have the brake line, which you can't really see. I'll get in here. I have the brake line right here. It's sitting behind that brake line. And then, of course, I have it zip tied a little bit to everything. So there's a zip tie here, and that is zip tying this little wire to it. And then I'm going to be putting another zip tie on here to hold it against the ground, which I put a ground right here. And then there's another ground that comes from the box. And I went and grounded to the chassis here. Now, On3's choice of the ground location, they actually put it on here, but I did not like that idea because it's just, there's too much crap bolted onto here. So I just created my own ground with a 3/8 self-tapping screw, and then I put grease on it as well to keep anything from rusting. Now, where the stainless ones are, I did not put grease. I probably should. I don't know. I may still do that yet. I'm not totally positive. But these eyelets up here, this is actually where the computer originally mounted, was these nuts on the back side here. They are spot welded to the chassis, so I just took advantage of that, and I ran a bolt through the eyelet. Rather than doing the self-tapper thing, I used a stainless steel bolt here and here, go into one of these guys to hold this into place. And then on the other side here, this is still loose. I gotta find something to attach that to, whatever. This is that isolation block that comes with the kit, and I'm taking that, all the power wires go to this isolation block. So this is the main one coming in, and then this one feeds, I don't remember where that one feeds. I think that goes, I'll have to look. This one goes to the electrical box, I know that. This one probably goes to the starter. Oh yeah, that's where that goes. Okay, this one goes up through and to this harness here, which goes to the starter, and then it also goes up to the alternator. And then all this is still factory wiring, slightly stretched out, but still factory, and I was able to make it work. To complete the wiring harness, I did not show the engine half of the wiring harness. So the harness that I took off after I pulled the engine out, I did not show me putting all that on there because honestly, you should be doing it before you put the engine in. I found out the hard way that it's very difficult to do the rear sensors, very difficult to do transmission, things like that while you're doing that harness. Be sure to do that harness before you put the engine in and save yourself the time I screwed myself on. Also, do this harness before you put the engine in as well, because that will save you a ton of time too. So right now I am assembling that suspension part of the system, and I'm going to get all that done. Then we're going to start working and talking about the actual mechanical side of things and some various changes that have to be made. Alright, so here is the 1, 2, 3, 4 pipe. It is basically the only difference in the entire system from 1, 2, 3, 4 and 134A is that it's more efficient because this guy here, you have your low side and your high side. So this is the outlet for the low side. So this is the cold end going here, and then the high side actually goes around that cold side, so it actually cools down the high side even more than it already was. So it makes it more efficient, essentially. if this was done to a 134A system, they could have easily got by without changing the Freon. But for some darn reason, they decide they have to change the refrigerant because things, I don't know. So, interesting little thing. I don't need it. I'm going to put it somewhere else for now, I guess. And then I will install the rest of the parts. And then I'll be charging the system. And the charging the system, again, will be on the other video. So I'm trying to put the air conditioning components in. And that line that is down here behind the engine bay, so you can kind of see it there. That guy right there, you can see this little spot that's, I'll go ahead and throw an arrow at it. That little spot there, I had to modify the back plate. So I had to pull that plate out of there, and there's this insulative cover on the other side, the engine side of it. I pulled that guy off, and then I cut a couple of slots in here. So you can see how this thing kind of pulls out of here, right? So I'll go ahead and yank it out quick. So you can see right down here, now those two holes on the top, that's for the self-tappers. I was using those for holding those wires down, the main battery cables. And then I have this guy here. I had to cut two slots in it, and that's to clear the AC line. So I still have to paint it yet, obviously, and I'm going to go ahead and do that here in a little bit, but it's easier for you guys to see without it painted. And then what I'm going to have to take and do is attach some kind of, I'm probably going to use aluminum foil tape here on both sides, and maybe a little bit of RTV to try and strengthen it a little bit. I don't want to sit and make an actual fancy plate for this. It's all hidden, it's all unseen anyway. I just want to be sure to seal it off, because the air intake is right here for the interior of the car, and if I were to just leave this hole open, for instance, all the hot air from the exhaust right there and the turbo right here would all come in here and heat up the inside of the car. And obviously, nobody wants to have that hot air heating up your interior when you're trying to stay cool. Yeah, the AC will cool it down if you have it on, but why do you need it on if it's not that warm outside? So that is all just to clear this line. Now this piece with the fabric removed clears. With the fabric installed, that is an issue, and you won't be able to get this thing off and get your fitting on there. The fitting might still be a little bit tight with this, but if I would have just put this on with that metal plate in there, then this piece would be down a little bit without modifying the metal plate, and it would be aiming kind of at the exhaust pipe right there. And obviously I can't have that either. So I had to tilt it this way, tighten this guy with a wrench, and now I'll be able to hook the line up, which can then go down into the pump down here, the AC compressor. So that's what I had to do for the AC in order to get it in a position where it's still going to be able to be used on the car. So that's all ready to go as soon as I paint that. I'm going to get that all assembled, get the battery tray and the battery all back in there. It's kind of a pain in the butt. I didn't expect to have to do that. Whatever. That's what these projects are all about, is learning those experiences. So if you get the chance, do that before you put the engine in. I don't know if I could say that enough. I don't know how many times I said it. God, this fly. I swear. I don't know how many times I've said it in this video, but it's a lot. Hold up, leave the motor out and do all this stuff first. That's the lesson of this particular video. So, yeah, definitely watch this video before you put the motor back in, if you do this project yourself. So like, share, subscribe, and I hope to see you on the next episode. We're going to continue on this project. I'm not sure if I'll finish it on the next section. Hopefully so. This project was a lot of wiring involved in this last video here. And of course the AC is becoming a little bit of a deal. So be sure to watch the next episode, of course. And we'll continue this thing and get it done.